It's the 2nd of May and Paul is out swimming along the French coastline when something odd catches his attention beneath the surface. Strange bubbles begin forming in the water around him while above his head the clouds start rotating in a slow deliberate circle. Paul watches the sky without realizing that the bubbles below have arranged themselves in a perfect ring around his body before vanishing completely without explanation. Back at home later that day, Paul discovers the kitchen tap has stopped working entirely. He heads down to the basement to investigate the water system and his young daughter Mia immediately follows him down, eager to be involved. While Paul gets to work on the problem, Mia settles herself on top of the fish tank with her toys and starts lobbying for more fish to keep the single one company. Paul shuts the idea down immediately, pointing out that one cat already complicates things enough. When Mia comes over to hand him something, she suddenly freezes at the sight of a spider nearby. Paul refuses to get rid of it, explaining that spiders earn their keep, and reassures her that it has no interest in hurting her. He grabs her and plays the growling monster who intends to eat her whole until she dissolves into laughter, then sends her back upstairs. While reaching for a bottle of wine, he notices mouse droppings tucked behind some furniture at the back of the room. That evening after dinner, Paul's wife Elise puts some music on and pulls Mia into the living room to dance with her, teaching her daughter that there is absolutely no incorrect way to move your body. Once Mia is in bed, Elise draws Paul into the dancing too, and the evening takes a warmer turn from there. 3 days later, on the 5th of May, Paul jolts awake feeling subtly but unmistakably off. He works through his wardrobe trying on shirt after shirt, and every single one seems to hang lower on him than it should. After a draining day at work, he sits down to dinner with his family, and when Mia asks him to read to her at bedtime, he declines, pleading exhaustion, and promises to do it the following evening. Elise fixes him with a look that says everything, and Paul goes upstairs to Mia's room. The reading session immediately descends into an argument about the precise dimensions of a meteorite in the story, and Paul gives up on it before the end, telling her it is time to sleep. As he moves toward the door, Mia slides off the bed and stretches out on the floor, initiating a game she clearly has no intention of abandoning. Paul plays along until she is satisfied, lifting her by the ankles and shaking her gently until she is laughing too hard to argue, then tucks her back into bed. By the 7th of May, the shirts have become noticeably worse. Elise asks whether he has been losing weight. Paul snaps back that dropping a few kilograms does not alter how long a person's arms and legs are, and Elise tells him flatly that his attitude is a problem before suggesting that something more significant might be happening to his body. Paul makes an appointment with his doctor, who runs through a standard examination and measures his height. Paul stares at the number. He has been 180 centimeters since his late teens, and the reading now says 176. The doctor asks a series of questions and ultimately puts it down to the natural physical changes that come with getting older. Paul leaves unconvinced. At work, not long after, he notices his safety helmet sliding around on his head. He checks the inside to make sure he has not accidentally picked up someone else's and finds his own name printed there clearly. In the middle of one night, Paul lies awake turning the image of those rotating clouds over and over in his mind. He eventually gets up and throws himself into exercise to try to exhaust his thoughts into silence. Elise finds him at it and coaxes him back to bed. On the 20th of May, Paul is standing in the shower when he realizes the head is positioned higher above him than it should be. Then his wedding ring slides clean off his finger and drops onto the floor. He stares at his hand for a long moment. When he comes downstairs, Elise sees immediately that her husband is now shorter than she is. This time, Paul goes directly to the hospital, where a full battery of tests is ordered, scans and blood work and everything the facility can offer. Hours later, a doctor sits down with him and delivers the results. Everything is within normal parameters. Everything except his measurements. He is now 165 centimeters tall and weighs 63 kilograms. In a matter of weeks, he has shed 15 centimeters of height and 10 kilograms of body weight. The doctor has no framework for what she is looking at and admits it openly, though she does observe that the process appears to be happening at a steady and consistent rate, which suggests it will continue. The tests multiply, but Paul cannot stop his mind from circling back to the same images: hospital rooms, blood draws, those clouds moving in their strange formation above the water. The thoughts follow him into his sleep, and one night he wakes from a particularly vivid nightmare and simply gets dressed and walks out of the building, deciding he is not helping himself by staying. At home, the reality of his situation presses in from every direction. When he sits in a chair, his feet no longer reach the floor. He feels increasingly separated from the rhythms of his family's daily life and eventually stops answering the hospital's calls. Time passes and he continues shrinking until, sitting in the same chair, he resembles something left there by a child. Tofu has become a source of genuine unease given the cat's growing size relative to Paul's own, and Elise puts the animal outside and blocks the cat door. By the 30th of June, Paul has reduced to roughly the dimensions of a mobile phone. Tofu sits pressed against the window glass watching him with a focus so complete that the rain soaking its fur goes entirely unnoticed. When Elise arrives home with a pair of people who are considering buying the house, Paul scrambles in a panic to get out of sight, pulling himself under the bed and lying there listening to strangers assess the value of every room he loves. When the visitors leave, Paul is furious. He demands to know why Elise said nothing about people coming when his exposure could have been dangerous. He also takes issue with the house being sold without any real conversation about it. Elise reminds him that she did raise the idea, and then she reminds him of the more pressing issue. There is no money coming in and she is out of ideas because Paul refuses to engage with any form of medical help. He tells her that treatment exists for sick people and he is not sick and has no interest in being used as a research subject by people who know nothing about his situation. The argument escalates until Elise raises her voice and the sheer physical force of the sound nearly knocks Paul off the counter. On the 5th of July, Mia places Paul inside her dollhouse and he commits to the game completely, moving through the tiny rooms and commenting on the fixtures and the layout as though it were a real home he has just moved into. He requests that Mia play something so he can have a dance with one of the dolls. Watching her father do this makes Mia smile in a way that has been absent for some time. Then she tries to revive the old monster game they used to play together, but the experience from inside Paul's perspective is overwhelming. Her voice and her movements aimed downward at his tiny form are far too much for him. Mia sees his face change and immediately apologizes. That night Elise cannot settle, and when Paul appears at the side of the bed she offers her open palm like a platform and he steps onto it to lie beside her. By the 30th of July Paul has shrunk to barely the size of a wine cork. He is working on something using thread and a fishing hook when Tofu forces the blocked pet door open through sheer persistence and comes padding into the house. The sudden appearance of the cat startles Paul badly and he loses his footing and lands directly on the hook. He works it carefully out of his stomach and removes his shirt to examine the damage, but Tofu has already dropped into a low crouch and is watching him with complete predatory focus. Paul grabs a sewing needle and runs. Tofu is immediately behind him. Paul ducks through the dollhouse hoping the structure will slow the cat, but Tofu simply clears it in a single jump and continues the pursuit. Paul reaches the basement door and rolls himself underneath it into the stairwell. Tofu extends a paw through the gap and catches Paul, sending him tumbling down the stairs. He lands inside a cardboard box filled with rubbish and the impact takes him under. When he comes around, Elise is already home. He starts shouting for her. She comes downstairs and looks around but cannot locate him in the dim space. Tofu follows her down and begins making satisfied sounds near the box, which leads Elise to a terrible conclusion. She chases the cat back up the stairs screaming at it. Paul hurls whatever he can find around the box in frustration at being so thoroughly invisible. Deep in the night Paul accepts that he is on his own for now and begins taking stock of what he has to work with. He uses a nail to cut a strip of fabric large enough to cover himself and fashions a belt from a length of wire. He finds a hole in the side of the box and climbs out. Needle in hand he starts picking his way toward the window and then stops completely when something moves in the darkness near him. Panic takes over and he scrambles up onto the platform surrounding the water heater. The pipe above him is still leaking, so he cups his hands under the drip and drinks and washes himself, including the wound on his stomach. Too frightened to venture further into the dark, he falls asleep against the base of the heater. Morning comes with the sound of Mia's voice somewhere above him calling his name. Paul sprints to the stairs, but they are far beyond what his body can now manage, and no matter how loudly he shouts, his voice does not carry upward. He hears the front door and then the car starting and understands his family has gone out. He turns back to the basement and begins a methodical search of the space. He finds a piece of chalk and writes his name in large letters on the floor. Exploring behind the furniture he finds ants working through a block of cheese and a mousetrap. He drives them off with the needle, then drops a nail onto the trap mechanism to spring it. It takes 2 attempts, but it snaps shut and the cheese is his. A spider drops into view above him and Paul hammers the needle repeatedly against the wall until the noise sends it elsewhere. He tries to punch through the side of another box using the nail, but the material resists him completely. He goes back to the rubbish box and retrieves a scrap of fabric and a bottle cap which he fills with water. He soaks the fabric and uses it to soften a section of cardboard in the new box until the nail breaks through. Inside he finds a box of matches sitting beyond a barrier of objects too heavy for him to shift. He fits an eraser into the hole he made and settles in to sleep. Voices above him follow shortly before the lights go out and he lies in the dark wondering who has come into the house. On the 15th of July voices wake him. He throws himself into making as much noise as possible with the nail and a paperclip. The basement door opens. Whoever it is takes a brief look down into the space and then closes the door again. Paul crumples onto the floor. He finds the cork of a wine bottle and goes at it with the needle until a thin stream begins to run. He fills a thimble and drinks until he is sick. The spider is watching him from the top of the fish tank, and in his blurred state Paul tells Mia's doll that he is about to handle the situation. He hauls himself up onto the tank. The spider watches him arrive and then simply moves away. Paul laughs at the ease of his victory and stops paying attention for just long enough. The spider comes back and knocks him into the water. He sinks and watches the fish moving around him before swimming back up to the surface where the spider is waiting at the rim. He goes back under and stays there, moving slowly through the water until the spider loses interest and retreats. Paul throws some fish food into the tank out of curiosity and tries a piece himself. It is revolting. That night, returning from the water heater with a full bottle cap, Paul finds the spider positioned directly beneath the tank. It begins advancing toward him, and Paul raises the needle and holds his ground, making swinging passes to keep it at a distance and connecting with its legs more than once. He ducks behind one of the thick furniture legs and the spider follows immediately. He drives the needle into it repeatedly until it backs off. The spider retreats. He breaks back through into the box with the matches, and this time with the obstruction cleared he can reach them. His reduced physical strength means it takes several attempts and most of the box before a flame catches. He builds a small fire and sits beside it eating cheese and talking to Mia's doll, saying how much he misses everyone at home and asking the doll to find a way to pass the message along to Mia if it ever gets the chance. The days that follow settle into a routine. Paul exercises, eats what cheese he can access, and sleeps inside the box. On the 20th of July, a man comes down the stairs. Paul runs to the base of the steps and waves and shouts, but he has shrunk so far now that even the ordinary volume of the man's footsteps and voice hit him like physical blows. When the man leaves, Paul emerges and notices the fish tank is empty. The fish is gone, and now the basement holds nothing alive but him. On the 2nd of August, a mosquito finds its way in through the window and hovers in front of Paul, studying him. He studies it back and a thought forms: if he has reached roughly the same scale as an insect, then perhaps the mesh of the window screen is now wide enough to let him through. He begins climbing the furniture toward the window. It is a long and exhausting process, but he eventually reaches the top and runs the length of it to launch himself off the edge and land on the brickwork of the wall. From there he simply walks along the surface toward the window. Paul keeps walking and reaches the window at last. He presses himself against the mesh and pushes. His body will not fit. Not yet. On the 7th of August, an ant wakes him by sampling his leg. He kicks it away and it immediately gets caught in the spider's web. A second ant finds the gap in the mesh and squeezes through to the outside. Paul follows it without hesitation and slips through the gap at last, clearing the spider's reach with a moment to spare. He steps out into the open world. The grass towers above him, and the droplets of water clinging to each blade are the size of things he once held in his palm. A butterfly passes close enough that the movement of its wings reaches him like a soft current of air, and they hold each other's gaze for a moment before it lifts away. Paul looks up at the night sky full of stars and thinks of his daughter. Somewhere above him in the house, Mia is lying in her own bed doing exactly the same thing. Make sure to like and subscribe for more notifications. Until next time. See you soon.